Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Freeing Your Mind podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Dukeman, and this week I have with me Jennifer Bjarnson. Did I say that right?
You did.
Okay, good job. Good for me. So how are you doing, Jennifer?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Doing good. Um, so let's just get down to the nitty gritty. Why don't you tell everybody about yourself and what you do and how you came to that space?
Yeah, so I am a rapid transformational hypnotherapist, also known as RTT Hypnotherapy. And it's a very specific type of hypnotherapy that allows us to um, really focus on the rapid part. Instead of having something that's prolonged, we really try to focus on when a client comes in, they're hurting and they're in pain.
Mhm.
And especially if it's like mental health or anxiety. I know for myself, I suffered for 20 plus years of multiple diagnoses from bipolar to ADHD. And so when I found this rapid hypnotherapy, it was so nice that we were able to just dive in, start working on the problem, and saw instant relief. So that's like the first thing that I do is I love helping people with multiple different things. I mean, it's just been across the board of the stuff that I've been able to help with, which is great. But the second thing I also like to do is I like to teach people how to help themselves and how to like control and what I did to overcome my own mental health stuff. So it really teach them that they don't always have to come to me, that they don't always have to go outside of themselves to find the answer, because that can get time consuming and that can become a real problem with like money, time, and things like that.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and I think it's fascinating just from people that I've talked to who you've worked with and just the range of what you've helped people with from like quitting smoking to anxiety, depression, PTSD, self-confidence stuff. I mean, it's pretty impressive just how wide-reaching what you do can be used to help alleviate any of these, just a range of problems.
Yeah, it's one of the things that when I started getting into the self-help space, I don't think my story is very unique that I was suffering myself. So my goal really was to I just wanted to not hate life. Like really that was I didn't have these big aspirations. I just thought, I'd like to not hate existing. And so when I started going after it, anytime I would do something, I would hear that, well, it takes time or, just you got to give it time. And man, after dealing with something for 20 plus, almost 30 years, that's the last thing that I wanted to do is give it time, give it a week, give it a month. Like I was like, I don't have time. I am about ready to tap out here. I need something to work. And so not only I liked the fact that it was quick. And then on top of that, it was then I started using myself as a human guinea pig because then I
Mm.
thought, well, okay, I feel great about this. I feel really good. I feel like it's helped with this. Could it help with this? And could it help with this? And then now it's kind of a challenge almost that when I meet somebody, I think, I bet it could help with that. And it has. I mean, I've met I know a ton of colleagues that specialize in different things, but I really do love um just getting the what are we going to work on now? Like how is this going to look? What is it that's going to help this person now and how is that going to look? It's really fun.
Yeah, and it's definitely since we met, I could tell it was definitely your passion and I just have found it so fascinating, like and just talking to you over the last almost year, how much it's just amazing. It's an amazing, impressive thing to me because it is so much of the it takes time in the mental health world, everything. And I guess it's not 100% like that, depending on where you're at in your mental space and when you're getting treatment. But it seems like for a lot of the people that I talk to, um, it's years of this process where Um, for you, what if I come in, what's your average duration on sessions?
So the session itself can be anywhere from like an hour and a half. I've had longer sessions where they have gone um maybe 2.5 hours.
Mm,
3 hours is that's really long because the client gets tired.
mm,
But that's a really long session, not typical. But typically, we when we're doing something, when we're working on an issue, I would have to say between 1 to 3 sessions is the average thing. I mean, I've had some that somebody when I was, what can I help you with? And they were working on anxiety. Um, I thought, oh, well, my when I was working on my anxiety, that took 3 sessions, right? So I
mm,
thought, okay, telling this person it could take 3 sessions. But then we got into it, 1 session, they're good, they're great. So it's super personal. I mean, it really depends on um how the person, how it's affected them in their life, how long it's affected them in their life, um, what the triggers are that's causing it. And some people, they instantly pick it up. And once they have that recognition of like, oh, this is why I'm doing that, they instantly let it go. They are absolutely indifferent to it from then on out. And then
mm,
other people, it can take, um, they definitely feel better after the first session. They definitely see an improvement. But then the next time they'll come back and they'll say, okay, I feel better. I feel great, but I can still like now this is kind of an issue. So let's work
mm.
on that. So that's kind of very personal, but um yeah.
Yeah, that to me is pretty important thing, having gone through some of the longer treatments on different things. That I mean, I did EMDR treatments for well over 3 years until finally I was just one day I was like, this isn't working. It's just not. Like I'd feel myself getting better, and then I'd kind of hit this plateau. And then being that I'm still in the fire service, I would experience another traumatic event. I'd go back down, and then I'd start spending time climbing back out, and I just plateau again. And eventually, in that process, they were like, "Well, you're just resistant to it. We got to go another direction." Where where this like 3 sessions, and even if it's more than 3 sessions, that's still just you're talking a month or two, right?
Yeah, and
Versus
yeah.
years.
Yeah, and I should say, so my story, my experience, there was a lot. I mean,
Mm,
anxiety was just the very tip very tip of the iceberg. And so each thing for me took multiple sessions because it was like I said, it was not just a few years, it was like
mm,
decades
mm,
of dealing with this. And um so like anxiety took I think like 2 or 3 sessions, and then ADHD took I think like 2 or 3 sessions, and then I used to get migraines, and that took, that itself is a thing. So if you have multiple things, some things do overlap. Some
mm,
things totally overlap. They'll say, I've got this and I've got this and I've got this, and they overlap. So you can kind of do that in one session. But then you have other things like, let's say somebody wants to get pregnant, but they also want to lose weight and they want to stop smoking. I mean, that's a lot happening. And we
yeah.
always like to say that your brain's going to stick on. I mean, you can come to me with all these things, right? Like, I want to fix just a laundry list of stuff. That's no problem. But in one session, if I just threw everything at you and I was like, hey, you're this and this and this, your brain's only going to stick on to about two, more like 2 things, maybe three. And so the reality is, do you just want your brain to choose on what you pick? Or would you like to choose and you like to, I want to work on this first, and I want to work on this next, and I want to work on this next. And so that's really how we decide, because now you're in control. How do you want this process to go, rather than like, I'm just going to throw everything, I'm just going to throw it all at you, and let's see what your brain picks out. So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
So what does a typical session look like?
So the first thing that we do is we say, what do you want? That is the very first thing. And the interesting thing is there's a lot of people that can't answer that question, because I get a lot of like, well, I
It
don't want
can be hard.
anxiety. Yeah. I don't want anxiety. I don't want my spouse to, I don't want to hate my spouse. I don't want to hate this. Right. Like I don't want to hate my job. And so the first thing is really narrowing it down. What is it that you want? Like, what is it? And so we'll just pick let's say an easy one, like confidence, right? You want more confidence. You want to feel more confident at your job. And then is what we would do is there's the induction, which it's a lot of people are worried about the fact that, they're going to feel hypnotized, or there's just kind of a hesitation there because they just don't really know what to expect, but it's really just feeling relaxed.
Mm.
That is it. You just feel really relaxed. And then we go back to a scene, a time, a memory, an event. And you're never going to relive anything. So it's not, especially like dealing with real trauma or PTSD or something really, really heavy. You don't ever go back to it. You don't relive it, but you just review it.
Mm.
And you can be very separate from it, almost like you're watching it on a TV. So that way there's not that anxiety of, I'm going to feel this again. Just
Mm.
like I can't take you back to the best meal of your life. I can't take you back to the best orgasm of your life. Like I can't take you back to a good thing. I can't take you back
To the
to
bad.
to the bad. You just review it. You can remember that it happened. And so once we go through, you basically, we in your life experience, you've had these experiences where you kind of like put these little, like, oh, this happened. So I put a meaning on it, right? Like this happened, therefore I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not quick enough. And then your brain kind of remembers that. And then as you're going along, you have another experience and your brain goes, oh, yep, here we go. We're proving ourselves right. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not whatever enough. And then as you go throughout life, you have these that just kind of stick. You have these experiences, and then you put a meaning. Some meanings are great, some meanings not so great. And so when we're going back in a session, we're going back to, okay, at one point you had confidence, right? Like as a kid, you had confidence. And how do I know that? Because you could have had snot running down your nose. You could have had a dirty diaper. And if somebody was like, look at you, you'd be
Mm.
smiling.
Yep.
That's confidence, right? No baby comes on the planet and doesn't have confidence.
Mm.
And so at some point, that confidence didn't go away. It was just clouded. It was just blanketed. And you had an experience, and then you stopped feeling confident because of some experience, some meaning that you put on it. And so then we go back to these and we just kind of pinpoint them. We say, all right, this is one, this is one, this is one. And then we start working back to say, all right, is that real? Like, is that a real statement, right? Okay, at 5 years old, you threw up in front of everybody in the school. And so, yes, that was embarrassing. But is it true that that would happen as an adult? Right? Because
Yeah.
that's what you're holding on to.
Mm.
All right, yes, this really hard thing happened to you, but is it true the way that you're seeing it? Is it accurate? And every single time, it's not true. It's not accurate. It's not even a thing. And so once your brain recognizes that, it goes away. You're like, oh, that's not even true anymore. I'm not 5. I'm not 12. This didn't happen, right? Or I mean, it happened, but this didn't mean what I thought it meant.
Yeah.
Or you can view it a certain way. And so then that's kind of the part where we break it apart. And it's kind of my favorite part, because you see in the person's face like that aha moment of like, I've been holding on to this thought for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 60 years. because I threw up in front of my school. Like that's like really? And so once they kind of, or once they let that go, it's such a shift. And then I give you a personalized recording that says, all right, the thing that we talked about before, you want more confidence. You want more confidence in your job. Now, because that blockage there, that trigger is gone and we've removed it and it's
Mhm.
not even a thing anymore. Now we put in a recording that you listen to for 21 days at minimum, and it retrains your brain. I am amazing. I am awesome. I can do this. People like me. Whatever it is we're working towards.
Nice. This is like it kind of reminds me of the Four Agreements book a little bit with that agreement that we all make as a child, like what you talked about, like throwing up in front of the school made me lose my confidence. And it's and you're facilitating the unlocking of that, the like letting go of that belief. That's great stuff. Because I
Yeah.
think as humans we all do that for a million different reasons, and we all have different stories and backgrounds, but everybody does that. And there's something that we all hold that really is just a false belief, but we've convinced ourselves that it defines us. And I think so much of that keeps us from being happy, being successful, enjoying life, feeling loved, loving ourselves, all those important things that we desire and feel are lacking.
Yeah. And the thing that went, I mean, one thing that just I find so sad is especially with firefighters or first responders and military people is you have such an intense job, and it's so intense and it's so life or death every day that really you have these experiences that are so they're just so intense. And then the idea that you're just supposed to now, okay, you just saw this horrific event happen. Now you're just supposed to go to your kid's soccer game and be present and be normal and act like you weren't just there,
Mhm.
and so it really does break my heart because to see what you guys go through, and then in a way society doesn't really put two and two, they don't really put two and two together,
Mhm.
that you just went through a traumatic experience, really truly a traumatic experience, and now you're just at your kid's baseball game or soccer game, and everybody's like, well, man, why are you acting so weird? Why are you right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
if
you're being really quiet.
you're being really quiet, like, come on, get, cheer for your kid, or like be a part of the family. It's and my heart goes out to you guys because I can see how that, because the way society looks at it, it would be really easy for you guys to just be like, well, what's my problem? Why can't I just get past this? Why can't I just, but you have this event that of course you're going to think, well, should I have done this different? Am I good enough? I should have gone faster. And it's not a little thing.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. It's such a fascinating thing. The more that I dive into this and through the journey that I went on and am still continuing to learn from and grow from with dealing with PTSD, how much we really do put ourselves in a box or in a cage, and we don't even know it. And it's also very fascinating to me too how I don't know that it's necessarily true, but there is many people that I've worked with that from the same standpoint who've seen a lot of the same things I have, or maybe things that are worse, and somehow they're so resilient and able to just to work through it, or they're just better at hiding it than I was. But it is very fascinating how our brain works and how we will put ourselves in that box, and finding those things that allow us to get out of it, that key to unlock the door. And the common thread that I always find is that we hold that key. It's always us that can decide if I'm going to sit in my mess today and be in a prison, be in a hellish nightmare. That's my choice. If I don't want to be here, I have the key. I just need to unlock the door and do whatever I need to do to make that happen. A lot of times we don't know what that is. without some outside help, though.
Yeah. I just going back kind of when you said how some people are handle it really well, that always really fascinated me because my husband was military, and you could just see we'd always get these when they come back from deployment. We as spouses would always get a debriefing about, be patient. You don't know how they're going to be, and all this stuff. And I always found it really fascinating that you could definitely see on some people, they were fine. I
Mhm.
mean, they were totally fine. It was as if they had been on a business trip. They are back. They are fine. And then you can see other guys that it was just really hard on them.
Mhm.
And and then when I got into hypnotherapy, it really does come down to, first of all, the story that you tell yourself. So, now I look at it, and some of those guys, the ones that handled it well, their story was, I did the best I could. It's my job. It's now time to move on. And then the other guys were very much like, it's my fault, or this is, they played a story of negativity, and it was
Mhm.
their fault, or they're not enough. And the interesting thing is, specifically with PTSD, is a lot of times you would think that when we go back to an event, you would think they would go back to like the really horrific war scenes, or they would go back. A lot of times they go back to a childhood memory. They go back to like it started in their childhood, and then it really just solidified from whatever event happened at war or traumatic event that they experienced.
Mhm.
And so, which I just find really fascinating, how many times they go back to childhood, not go back to what you think would be the more traumatic event.
Yeah, that's really fascinating.
Yeah.
Because you would you would really think that it was that traumatic event, even though that event is just the trigger, I guess, that probably causes it. It's like it may be like the straw that broke the camel's back. It's that one thing that overloads you. Because I've often explained it as that. I mean, I handled it for years, for I don't know, about 15 years. And there's times that I can look back now, I'm like, yeah, I was a little short with people. There was some burnout, compassion fatigue, that you'd go on some of these calls over and over again with the person that always calls you at 2 in the morning when were experiencing the same pain at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but they couldn't be bothered because their show was on TV or whatever they had going. So you'd get that compassion fatigue. But for the most part, like I always just handled it. I was fine and I was good with it. And I always tell people, like, yeah, like you're good until the one day that you're not. And it is fascinating that it's just that one event. And I've noticed that with other people who have fallen on the hard times dealing with PTSD or other traumatic events, that it's that one event. And when we get to know people so well that we're working with in the situations like that, a lot of times we can see the event. We're there at that event, and it may be something that just feels fine to me, but that other person it just wrecks them because our brains work so differently that we can watch the same TV show and I'm going to see a very different portion of that show than you will because our brains are different and we're not attached. Um, so it's just really fascinating stuff and
Yeah.
how that all ties together.
Yeah. It's definitely, I, I always find it so fascinating. I know I kind of mentioned it, with when I myself having anxiety and working through that. It's so interesting how if I'm working with somebody with anxiety, you kind of have an idea, but then it can take a total left, it can take a total left turn. And
Mm.
you're like, okay, I get what I get what we're working on, and I get that it's the same thing. But then what created their anxiety versus what created my anxiety. It's you would think sometimes you would think it's this massive traumatic event, right? In
Mm,
fact, one of the things, well, I'll just use my kids as an example. So when my kids were really, really little, we were going out for ice cream or something, and my husband and I, we are still in the car while the kids go into the house.
mm,
And we're talking, and all of a sudden we heard just blood curdling screams. Just so we go running in. I mean, we are just full panic mode running in there. And we have 4 kids. So 3 of them are surrounding my third boy, and they're just screaming, and like we're trying to figure out what is happening. And all of a sudden, my third boy goes, "It's biting me, it's biting me." And we can't figure out what's going on. So we're like ripping off his shirt, and out comes this yellow wasp from underneath his shirt. And he's got all these little bites on him and stings on him. And he was just little, and we just felt so bad. Well, later on, I'm working with him for something, and he has just severe anxiety about something. And I said, all right, well, let's do a session on you, right? Like I get to just, I get to use my kids as little guinea pigs. And so let's work on that. So we're regressing back, and he goes back to this event when he was biting. And, or I'm sorry, my other son, I was working on him, and he goes back to this event. And it was really traumatic to watch his brother go through what he went through, that he had fear and he had anxiety of like flying things and bugs. And so a lot of times we think it's like gonna be this, you got to be in war, or you got to see a really, really traumatic event. You got to be it's got to be this ultimate insane thing that nobody can handle.
mm,
And a lot of times it goes back to like these little tiny things. Like, yeah, obviously, like there's these big things that happen, and of course they're traumatic, but a lot of times it's these little things that you would never ever put, that our little childhood brains, we can't comprehend, we can't grasp why it was that way. We can't really fix it in our head. And so we just keep fixating on it and fixating on it. And even though we grow up, that still sticks around. And
mm.
then something else happens when we're older, and it just adds to it and adds to it. And so I always find it really fascinating when we go back. It's usually like people kind of think it's going to be this really big thing, and it's not always.
It's amazing. The brain is such a amazing thing, and like how we mask things
Yeah.
and all of that. It's really remarkable. Um, so I don't know if that you really touched on it, but it almost kind of sounded like we are maybe going down the path. Like I know with like a lot of the people that have seeked out treatment, I know for me, I always kind of felt like, why am I feeling so bad? Because there's people who have seen way more than I have, or way worse things, and kind of had this like comparison dialogue in my head that that I shouldn't be this way because, and just almost discounting my experience, discounting the trauma. And I think especially when you can correlate it to a childhood event that you would most people would be like, that was the thing that caused this. um it changes the perspective on that. But I also think that it's important that we have to recognize that my hardest thing is going to be different than your hardest thing, or your one thing that is just you're incapable of dealing with, it's too much, is going to be different than mine. And so it's not so much the comparison thing that we need to be doing, but we need to recognize that your feelings are your feelings, and if you're in a bad spot, you just are, and you need to go get the help that you need, because it's back to the key in the prison. You're the only one that can be the catalyst there that decides, hey, I'm going to go get help. I'm going to start this process. And especially when you can relate it to that it is often a childhood event. And if that's Probably not always the case, but it sounds like a lot of the time it is. So there, it puts
Yeah.
us in this commonality, all of us.
Yeah, there's two things about that that I find interesting. The first thing is I was definitely, I know I've touched on a little bit, but like I struggled with my own mental health and diagnoses. And I used to think I was just the biggest freak. Like I just thought, and not only did I think that, but to show it to people or to show my imperfection, I mean, like I I I would rather do anything but show I wasn't perfect and that I wasn't okay and I wasn't right in the head. And the thing that I learned and the thing like the biggest thing that was an aha moment for me, one of them was is when I started really kind of getting control of it and coming back to like a normal feeling. I hate to use the word normal, but
Mm,
a normal feeling. I would look around and I'm like, oh, everybody's messed up. They're
mm,
just messed up in a different way. I'm messed up.
yep.
And I've watched that so many times. Like I remember there's one person I watched and they just looked like they had their life together all the time. And then I saw them with something and they lost their cool, I don't know, like at a kid's basketball game. And I thought, you you are just as nuts as I am. You're just nuts in a different area.
Hmm.
And everybody is. And the thing is we all are growing and we're all learning in different things. You can't be perfect in every area. And that kind of brings me to the second part, which is um on my one of the things that I like to teach people and I like to educate people on because um I didn't know this and so many self-help people talk about where we're going, like having a
Mm,
goal, right? And everybody focuses on the same three goals, which is money, health, and social, like
mm,
a better relationships. Everybody like, I want more money, I want better relationships, I want better health. That's kind of everybody's goal. But if you were to look at like GPS, right? And your destination, you punch in, you're like, I want to go to Cleveland, Ohio. Great. Where are you? The next question is, well, where are you starting from? Where are we going to
mm,
start from? And one of the things that I've noticed, and this is kind of a thing that I've noticed more frequently that I've dived into like now helping people, and so many people know where they want to go. Very few people know where they're at. They don't really know where they're at. And that portion is I like to break it into three sections, which is your mental, your spiritual, and your emotional. And that's your starting point. And so many people are focused on I want money, I want better health, and I want better relationships, right? I want a spouse, I want whatever. But so few people, if I were to say, what is your passion in life? Like what is your unique set of skills that only you can do? That you and you only you were put on this planet for. There's very few people who have been able to answer that for me.
I believe you 100%.
Yeah. And then if I were to say, all right, okay, what are your what are your like what do you need? What are your top needs? What are your I call them my rules because I think they're
Mhm.
so important. And your rules create your standards and your standards create your boundaries. And I have so many people who have no idea what their boundaries are, but I say, all right, what's your love language? Well, I don't know. Well, what's, in the I learned this from Tony Robbins, but like the six needs: variety, consistency, love, connection, significance, growth, and contribution. So I'll say,
Mm,
all right, here's this list. What are your top two? I don't know. Okay, so you don't know what your standards are. That's why you don't have any boundaries, right? And then you go to a different area and I say, all right, what you can do anything in this life. Really? You can do anything in this life. What do you want to experience? Like what do you want to experience? I don't know. I want money. I'm like, that's not an experience. I mean, it buys experiences,
yeah.
right? And so it's so fascinating to me that so many people are focusing on where they're going. But if you were to ask the simple questions of like, where are they at? Very few people can answer that. But it's such a basic question that, well, then how do you know where to go? how do you know that you want to follow, like, who are we mentoring from? Because there's so many ways to get money. There's so many ways to have a healthy relationship. I'm sure your relationship looks very different from my relationship. So if I was trying to follow your relationship and the way you did it, how do I know I would be happy? Because
Mhm.
we're two different people, right?
Yeah.
And so I think I love to start. I mean, I teach that more on like my social media and like podcasts and stuff like that. That's kind of stuff I like to teach, because so many people, when they come to, when they come to see me, I'll say, all right, what do we want? I don't know. I'm not happy.
And that is the truth. And I think in today's world, it might be even harder to answer that question. It's so easy if we're not careful with social media and how we use social media to just scroll through and see perfect life after perfect life after perfect life because that's what they're posting. Nobody's posting the awful day that they had. Rarely. There might be a venting moment on there, but most people are posting those happy times, the family vacations, the holidays, the birthdays, the celebrations of life. And so I think when we see that, it's very easy to get stuck in this mentality that everybody else has a perfect life. So I don't know who I am because I'm not that, that's not my life. Even though,
Yeah.
like you had said earlier, that everybody has their own crazy, essentially, like we all do, but the perception of what we have now, because it's so hyper focused on social media, uh, that perception is just that there's something wrong with me. I don't have that perfect life that everybody else has. So I don't know who I am because I'm not that. And that's what perfect is. So it must be money, happiness, relationships that get me there versus whatever it actually is that's latent inside me, right?
Yeah. It really is. And like, I have tried, I really try to get so many people. I'm like, all right, learn your rules. Like, who are you? Because if you're, one of the things I like to just start with is like, are you a high energy person or are you a low energy person? Because those are two very different, just in working out, those are
Mm,
two very, very different things. If you're a high energy person, you need a crazy amount of workout because you just got to get rid of that energy. You're
mm,
just, just by nature, you're going to have so much more energy, and it's going to be just kind of oozing out of you. And if you don't get it out, then it can explode, and
mm,
you can kind of go off on other people because you haven't gotten that energy out. But if you're a low energy person, which I am a lower energy person, and so
mm,
working out, I can work out and like doing kind of like a Pilates and a yoga, like that's great for me. I don't
mm,
need this intense, like I don't need to get that energy out. I love a good workout, and
mm,
it makes me feel good to be strong, but it's a completely different reason. It gives me a completely different outcome than a higher energy person. And then
mm,
same with like, are you a higher intense person or are you a low intense person? And if you're a higher intense person, then you're kind of more of like I'm going to internalize this. I'm going to really like think about it. I'm going to like, right, like
yeah.
it's really serious. Things are kind of serious all the time. And if you're like a low intense person, you're kind of like, you want people to get along. You want just, let's just make this a light experience kind of thing. And that's really important to know because of relationships. If you have one person that's more intense and you have one person that's not as intense,
Mm,
now you've got to manage that relationship. If you have both who are both very intense, that's another challenge in your
yep.
relationship. And it doesn't make any of them good, it doesn't make any of them bad. It's just what is, now you're dealing with a different strength and you are dealing with a different challenge.
Mm, yeah, definitely. And all that's going to be different tools in how we deal with those.
Yeah,
That's good
absolutely.
stuff. It's really good stuff. You mentioned your podcast. So what is your podcast and what's that all about?
So my name, the basic to bold is all my social media, podcast, everything. So it's super easy to find me anywhere. on all the platforms. But my podcast specifically, I try to do a couple of things. One, I my goal is to teach the lessons like I have learned and how I overcame not so much my story, but just like the techniques that I learned. Like if I had something, for instance, I got bad news one time. And so one of my podcasts was, well, this is how I logically work through it. I got this bad news, and rather than it ruining my entire day, this is how I work through it. Why was I expecting this outcome? You know, I was expecting it because I wanted significance from a group of people that I value their opinion. Well, I don't really need it. I don't really need their significance. I don't really need their validation.
Mm.
And so it kind of helped me get past to be like, okay, I'm all right. I'm all right to get like, I'm okay that I didn't get whatever I was working towards. And then other things that I do is I'll do very mini hypnotherapy sessions. So it's not a full session. I try to keep it about 20 minutes where a regular session would be about an hour and a half.
Mm.
And then I try to do very general, right? Like confidence or uh, trying to think like maybe feeling like you're enough, that kind of thing. And so they're really small, but it gives you kind of an idea of what a session would look like. It gives you kind of like getting used to that feeling of going under hypnosis, feeling that relaxed feeling. And so you can just practice and see if that and kind of get rid of stuff that you don't really want to deal with. And
Yeah.
then when you come see me, we can really get the nitty-gritty of more personal things.
Nice. That's awesome. Um, and so when you say come see you, you're not just an in-person hypnotherapist. Is that right?
No, in fact, most of my clients are remote. I do see people in person, but I find specifically with mental health, PTSD, anxiety, it works. Not that it works better, but it makes the person more comfortable because they are in their own home. They're not
Mm.
trying to now deal with a circumstance that that they feel out of control.
Mm.
And so I find I when it comes to those types of things, I find more most people like to do it in a remote setting.
Okay, that makes sense. And I'm sure that like in the post-COVID era, that's become quite the norm. I know there's a bunch of different, well, pretty much every therapist offers remote telehealth, and I'm sure it's probably I've never done the remote thing, but I'm sure that there is a little bit of comfort there just in that you're in your own space, place that's familiar to you. You're not having to sit in a waiting room with a bunch of people that you don't know and then let your mind do whatever your mind does in that process. So I can definitely see the benefit to that. That's good stuff. It's,
Yep.
and it makes you available for a much broader range of people because of that, that you're able to, where it wouldn't normally be feasible for you to work with somebody up in New York, per se, it makes it so that's a possibility.
Yeah, it's really nice because it definitely helps the other person. And it makes it so that we can I've even somebody in town,
Mm.
they were on a trip or something and they're like, I'm having a panic. I'm feeling stressed, or I can't remember what it was, something like a panic attack or stress.
Mm.
And they're like, can we do a quick session? And they were like on a family vacation. Like they were away. I'm like, yep, let's hurry and do it. So
Yeah.
yeah. So it makes it really nice. And it's the exact same. You wouldn't it's not any less of an effect.
Mm.
So it makes it really nice.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good thing to have for anybody that wants to be in their comfort zone, and especially on those spur of the moment things like that, where with traditional therapy, a lot of times there are those moments where you're in a like a high state of panic or anxiety, or just that space where you want that relief, but you're like, well, my appointment's in a week or 2 weeks or whenever it is, and to be able to get on and potentially mitigate that right away is a great option.
Yeah, that's one thing that I really try to be aware of, just because having dealt with it myself for so long, I know that it can be equally as painful as any physical problem.
Mm,
And I think it's getting more recognition. Obviously, I think people are starting to recognize it more. I think it's being talked about
mm,
more, which is great. But I do also, I think sometimes the mentality of like, well, it's mental health. Um, you're just, this is something you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life. I, I just, that wasn't acceptable to me. And
yeah.
so and so when I decided that one, which is why I got doing what I'm doing, because I just wanted to fix it and I wanted to fix it fast because
Yeah.
I just, if you've ever been in that situation, it's awful and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. And so like if somebody calls me and they say I'm in a really bad spot, got it. Let's there's no reason to put this off any
Yep.
longer.
And I
Let's
think
get
that's
after it.
certainly the case. If you're feeling like you need that help, it reach out and get it going. Don't put it off. And because I think oftentimes we put it off because we're like, well, I'm not that bad. Even though our initial thought is, hey, I'm really bad. And then we talk ourselves out of it.
Yeah. Oh god. Yep. Yeah. One of the I was doing training, I think, one time, and I learned one of the biggest things. Well, this is specifically for depression, but one of the biggest things for depression is you feel helpless, hopeless, and it's never going to change.
Mm,
And so I, I had to really tell myself that I was like, okay, you think this is helpless, hopeless, and it's never going to change. And I really had to tell myself that's not accurate because
mm,
it's not true, even though I really at the bottom of my soul, the core of my being feel like that is a true statement. I was like, it's not true. And you got to do something about it. And so just taking that first step, even if the first step is like messaging me and going, I'm probably not that bad, right?
yeah.
Because that's something I would do. It's not a big deal, even though it's a really big deal.
Yep.
But yeah, even if it's that, or even if it's reaching out to a friend, even if
Mm,
it's even smaller, like if you're like me and feel super embarrassed telling somebody it's really that bad, then go listen to you know, on the podcast, go try it out. Go try you can at least do something. And I know you've talked about a lot in your social media about the 1%.
mm,
And man, I think with mental health, that was one of the hardest things for me to do, but one of
yeah.
the biggest things because you think, oh, it's just a little step. It's not going to make that big of a difference. And it does.
It
It's
does.
so huge.
Absolutely. And I think too, it's that those little steps, like at the time, they are little steps and we know they're little steps, but because of where we're at and the space we're in, it seems like such a monumental step. It seems like it's just like the equivalent of going to the moon. Like it's just I can't just do that. I can't just get in my car and go. And
Yeah.
literally it's just that little thing like just get up 5 minutes early and just stare at yourself in the mirror for a couple minutes and just smile. High five yourself, something, something to make you feel good about yourself. Tell yourself you love yourself in front of the mirror. It's a simple thing. I mean, you're already there washing your hands after you go to the bathroom. Like you're in front of the mirror, just hey, love you. And it's that little 1% thing. And we convince ourselves that it's silly or that it's a hard thing. And really it's just be willing to do it because like I tell people, I'm like, if you don't believe that it works, prove me wrong. Just go do it. Prove me wrong. Go do it for 30 days straight. And if you don't notice any effect, even just the littlest effect, let me know. And anybody who's done it never comes back and says that didn't work.
Yeah. I have this, I'll, you're going to think this is the dumbest thing because I think it's the dumbest thing, even though I tell people, and I've told people for years, I learned this exercise and it sounds so ridiculous, especially if you've been struggling, like fighting your brain for a really long
Mm,
time. You're going to think this is not real and it's so stupid. But okay, so I'll use my experience to explain how to do it. So I used to have a absolute fear of flying, just
mm,
horrific fear of flying. And then I started getting over that. But the thing that at that point, or at a certain point, flying was okay. But then the turbulence. So if ever we had turbulence, that was like, it would kind of just start the anxiety back up again. So as long as there was no turbulence, I was fine. Well, I had learned this technique and I was flying back, and the captain came on and he goes, "Hey, we're going to stop craft services." He goes, "For the remainder of the flight," which it was like 45 minutes or an hour or something like that. He goes, "It's going to get really bumpy." He goes, "I need you guys to wrap all this up because we are going to hit turbulence and it's going to get bad." And so the trick that I had learned is you sit there and you tell yourself, "I love this. This is amazing. This is awesome. This is great. Oh my gosh, I'm having so much fun." And as I'm sitting there preparing for this turbulence, I thought, I'm going to lose it. Like I can't do this because it's supposed to be really bad. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to try it. I have nothing to lose. I'm going to try it. So the whole time it kind of gets going. And I thought, oh my gosh, I love this. This is awesome. I love it. I love roller coasters. I do not love roller coasters. And
mm.
I was like, this is the best. Oh my gosh. And so when it would like drop, that dropping feeling, I was like, in my mind, I was saying, "Do it again, go again. This is the best." Like kind of visualizing as if I'm on a roller coaster and I'm having the time of my life and I'm just enjoying every bit of this. And I'm like, kind of closing my eyes, doing this meditation of like, this is amazing. Yes, keep going. Okay. And, but also in my head, I'm going, this is the dumbest thing I have ever done in my life because I cannot, like, there's no way this is going to work. So we get landed, and as I'm looking back, I think, "Oh, okay, that wasn't that bad." Like,
Mm.
so I think he just misjudged the turbulence because I'm like, "Yeah, that wasn't horrible. Like, it wasn't great, but it wasn't horrible like he was planning." And I turned to the guy next to me, and he is just white knuckled and just like breathing deep. And he goes, "I fly a lot." And he goes, "That has to be the worst turbulence I have ever been in." And I go, in my mind, I'm like, that actually worked. And I to this day, anytime I'm doing anything, I'm like, this is great. This is awesome. I'm so excited. And I tell people, and every time I tell people, I'm like, you're not gonna believe this. It sounds so ridiculous. It sounds so stupid, but I swear it works. And it does.
Yep. It's amazing. The power of, I guess, just it's the power of your own mind, the power of what you decide to believe is there and it's real. And I never believed it. Like I always thought it was the dumbest thing. Like until probably the last couple years, like people would suggest doing those things, or you'd hear somebody talk about it, and you're just like, yeah, that's a bunch of garbage. And then once you actually, okay, well, what do I have to lose? And once you try it, and you're like, oh, okay, maybe there's something here. And then that continued effort, and it changes everything. And it changes our perspective, our perception, everything, and allows us to, I think it allows us to enjoy our lives and to have a more fulfilling life because we're not as worried about the different things that are blockages for us. Social anxiety, depression, scare, fear of anything, whatever that happens to be. And of course, I've also adopted the like if it's difficult or hard or scary, I probably need to go do it, which ends up that I do a lot of dumb stuff that I was like, why am I doing this? But it changes the way I think about things and my perception of things. And I go, well, that wasn't that bad.
Yeah. Last year, I heard this quote and I put it to the test, and it absolutely changed my life. And to this day, so it says, choose your challenge or your challenges will choose you. And at
Yes.
first, I thought if I do hard things and I try to do like more hard things, that's just going to come like it's not like the other hard things that I have are going to go away. I'm now just going to have more hard things.
Mhm.
And what blew my mind is no, the hard things that I didn't choose did go away. And now the hard things that I am working towards are truly the only hard things in my life.
Mhm.
And now the results are the results I want. Because when you don't choose it, I hope this is making I hope this
Oh
is
yeah,
making
no, it
sense.
makes sense to me for
Yeah,
sure.
because I really believed, I thought I already have so many hard things going on in my life. I don't want to choose more hard things.
Mhm.
And so, but the reality is all of that just kind of went off to the wayside. And now when I would accomplish something hard, it was actually something I was excited about and something I wanted the result in. But when I just sat back and I didn't really go after anything and I just tried to like skate by, then things would show up. I wasn't that excited about them. I wasn't that invested in them. And I was like, oh, all right, well, this is a challenge. All right, let's get through this challenge. And even though I got through it, I wasn't that excited about it because I wasn't like I didn't care about the result.
Yeah.
But now, so all last year, I just went after stuff. I did just really, really hard stuff. And I thought, okay, well, what are you gonna do? You're gonna go back to like getting results that you don't really care about? Or are you gonna go after this hard thing? And sometimes, don't get me wrong, like sometimes the hard thing was like getting out of bed. Like
Yeah.
that was
And it's
that
a
was the
real thing
that was
sometimes.
the hard thing. And I was like, I don't want to get out of bed. Like I can't. I just want to stay here. That was the hard thing. And one of the like when I started not just choosing the hard thing, but celebrating what I was doing, then it ramped it up even farther because
Mhm.
now I was celebrating myself rather than telling myself I was like, "Oh god, are you really going to stay in bed all day? Are you that big of a loser?" Now it was like I'd get out of bed and I'd be like, "Okay, I did the hard thing." And I'd be like, "You're awesome. You're great." But in the back of my mind I'm like, "Well, maybe." But then I'm like, "You're great. You're awesome." Kind of doing that repetitive thing like I
Yep.
did in the airplane. And so now it's just those one little shifts, those tiny little
Mhm.
things just absolutely, I grew way more last year than I'd have to say probably in the last 5 years before that.
Absolutely. And so much of it too, I think we can really easily fool ourselves into thinking we have to take on like this whole big thing at once. And when I started doing very similar to what you're talking about, it was just one thing. Like didn't meditate. Brittany's like, you should do it. And I'm like, it's dumb, doesn't work. Never been able, no. And then I started and I was like, yep, this is dumb. Yep, this is dumb. And then eventually I'm like, oh wait, I think I'm starting to get it. And yeah, it was only 2 or 3 minutes that was actual clarity. And the rest was just a bunch of squirrels running around in my head. But then pretty soon it's like, oh, it's 8 minutes of clarity and a bunch of squirrels running around in my head for the other two. And and then you start building it up. And then that becomes a routine because it's that repetitive 1 degree shift over and over and over again. And then I would find myself adding something else in that, yep, I've got this down. And I just started building. My morning routine used to just be I'd get up, I'd brush my teeth, shower, eat breakfast, get ready for work. And now I just keep allotting myself more time in the morning to journal, to meditate, to read and study things. And like so I there's always a book that I'm working on, whatever, regardless of what it is, something that's feeding me knowledge. But then I also started like a month ago just getting into reading about like the stock market and how that works and trends. And I still think the stock market is just like, hey, I'm gambling here. I still feel that way about it, but I'm starting to actually find some fascination with the consistency of reading every day about what was up in or down in aftermarket trading and why and the trends associated with it. Still don't really understand it, but it's just one more thing that I'm like, well, it's adding some value into my life. And it's just this little shift. And to somebody else, that might be the worst thing ever to even take on. And but it may be that, you want to go for a 10-minute walk every morning or whatever that is. And, it's fine when it's bright and sunny out in the morning, but then when you get into the dark days of winter, you're like, it's not going to be light for another 2 hours. I don't want to go do this.
And this is something that interests me is how everybody finds different stuff. So I don't know if this was you, but for me, I would always look at somebody in the self-help space and the development space, and I would think, okay, they're meditating, they're getting up at 4 a.m, they're exercising. I mean, they're killing it at the gym for like 45 minutes, and they're drinking a gallon of water. And so I think I'm going to change my life, right? And then, so I try to hit all of that in like one day. And
Mhm.
then I thought, okay, well, like that's all one thing. And then when I stopped thinking that way, and I just literally like, okay, so one of the things I started doing is I'm going to get up early. I'm
Mhm.
not going to get up early and do anything. I'm
Mhm.
not going to get up early and work out. I'm not going to get up early and read. I'm not going to get up early and journal. I'm not going to get up early and meditate. I'm just going to get up early. That's it. And
Mhm.
I was really surprised that how slow I had to go, because one, I was fighting my head, right? Like you're
Mhm.
fighting your head on how stupid it is and how ridiculous it is. So to retrain that, however you do that, whether you journal or do real self positive talk,
Mhm.
however you do that, that was a thing. So just getting past the energy of getting up, not getting up and working out, not
Yep.
getting up and journaling. And so then I was like, okay, I now can get up. Well, now I'm not like getting up and like falling asleep. What do I want to do now? Okay, well, should I journal? Let's try and journal. Or should I meditate? Okay, let's meditate. But then it was like, okay, just do one thing. Just do
Mhm.
one thing. And I'm really fascinated. Was that hard for you? Because it was really hard for me to just do one thing rather than like
Yep.
ramp it all together.
Yep. Yeah. I picked one thing at a time, and even just the getting up earlier. Um, I did that in like 10-minute increments. So I went from 5 o'clock to 4:50 and kept the alarm that way. Even though the first few days, like I laid there till 5 o'clock in bed and didn't get up. And then eventually it was like, well, I laid there for 5 minutes and got up at 5:50 or 4:55. And then once I was consistent at 4:50, it's time to get up. Then I'd roll the clock on the or the alarm clock back even further. And everything that I do in the morning, it was one thing at a time that I added. Like journaling was new to this year. It was something that actually it was you had the oh dang it, what was it called?
Oh,
You created that program,
the 30-day awareness
the
challenge.
30 day, and
Okay,
so
yeah.
so that was a lot of what you had in that. I was like, I'm already doing a lot of this. And so I just added the journaling component because I've never taken the time to really do that. And so then once I did that and became consistent at that, I'm like, okay, cool. And it was easy once it was in place. But to me, like if I were to just say I'm going to get up an hour earlier, and oh by the way, in that hour that I'm going to have available to me starting tomorrow, I'm going to journal for 10-15 minutes. I'm going to read for 20 minutes. I'm going to do this and this and this. It's almost, I think, for a lot of people might set you up for failure. I think
Yeah,
there's
it did
probably
me.
the certain type of people that just do it. They're just that's their personality type, and they're like, "Yep, challenge done."
Oh, bless their soul. Seriously,
Yeah,
like you're amazing. If you can do that,
yeah,
like I have no, I have no notes. You're amazing. If you can sit there and be like, I'm going to get up at 5, or I'm going to get up at 4, and then I'm going to journal, and then I'm going to work out for 45 minutes, and I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to shower, and like you do it, that's amazing. But I totally would judge myself. I mean, I would so harshly judge myself on like somebody's 10-year healing and wellness journey,
yeah.
and I was like year 1, and I'd be like, why can't I do this? Why am I such a loser? What is wrong with me? Didn't
And
realize that it took them 7 years to get there.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that too is that instant gratification society that we live in, that we
Yeah.
want that result right now. Like, yeah, I meditated today. Why am I not just an expert at it? Why is it not, you know, and knowing that like many of us growing up did sports and different things, and some of us had more natural talent than others, but nobody played baseball and just instantly, picked up the bat and ball and it was just home run after home run. It took effort. That
Yeah.
some of them got that home run for faster than anybody else, but it was the consistent effort that got them there. And we overlook that a lot. And I think that that hurts our own head more than anything else.
You know what story I love? Do you know who Tim Grover is?
Hmm.
Okay. So somebody was asking him, he was basically doing this podcast about mindset and like not pushing through, but like mindset and not so much natural ability, but like pushing through when it gets hard. Even if you have great natural ability, still pushing through when it's hard. And so the person doing the podcast asked them, because he worked with Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Michael Jackson, like he worked with all these amazing athletes. And they were specifically talking about basketball, but they said, have you seen anybody with more natural talent than like Michael Jackson or LeBron James or Kobe Bryant, like these really, really high level players, right?
Mm.
And they said, have you seen anybody with more natural talent than these guys? But they just didn't make it because their mindset, they just quit, right? They
Mm.
just didn't believe they had it. And he goes, oh yeah, he goes, a lot. And that really just shifted the way that I thought that, like, he goes, at a certain point, natural ability, like that doesn't help you out. He goes, yeah, maybe you might be really good in like middle school and high school, but he goes, there's a certain point where that taps out and you just have to push forward. And
Yep.
he goes, those people that are willing to push forward are the ones who are going to win over, doesn't matter how much natural ability you have, they're the
Mm.
ones that are going to win. And it just really switched my mindset to say, it's not a natural ability. This is going to be hard for everyone at some, maybe like you said, maybe some people really get it and can get up and get after it, which is awesome. And then some people, like myself, where it's going to take me a little bit of time. But at a certain point, if I don't quit, I'm still going to pass up that person with more natural ability
Yep.
any day.
Yep. Consistency is the key to everything.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's big, 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 big. So Jen, uh, just final thoughts that you might have. If there's anybody that was struggling right now watching this, or on the fence about getting treatment, what would you say to them?
Well, somebody who's really struggling right now, I would probably have to say one of the biggest things when I was at my lowest of my low, I really did. I started doing this thing, and it helped me. I wouldn't say it like fixed anything right off the bat, but the more I made it a habit, the more it really helped me so that I could then move forward to get more help, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I would have to say, if somebody's really struggling, take the next day, week, month, and really praise yourself for everything that you do. And I mean everything that you do. I mean, you picked up a spoon and ate cold cereal. That was amazing. That's the best dinner or breakfast that you have ever prepared. Like, look at you that you are feeding yourself. And because what I found is when I was really struggling, one of the reasons I was struggling is because I berated myself over everything. Everything was never good enough. Nothing I did was enough. Nothing I said was enough. I should have done it this way. If I cooked my family a meal, it should have been organic. If I cooked it a meal from scratch and it was organic, I should have made extra so that I can feed in, like, have an extra meal later. Like, it was never good enough.
Mm,
And the thing that I find is that's one of the biggest things that people do that are really struggling with their mental health is they're just I love this saying, stop shoulding all over yourself.
mm,
I should do this. I should do that. This is what I should have done. This is what I should have said. Just stop shoulding all over yourself. Everything you do is fine. And I just really started saying, it's enough. It's enough. We had cold cereal for dinner. It was enough. We had pizza. It was enough. I I sat in my room by myself, taking alone time. That was enough. And at first, yeah, you're kind of fighting your brain, but the more I did it, the more it eased up. And the more like I just was able to breathe because your brain, if there's a statistic that says if somebody else says something to you, they're like, oh my gosh,
mm,
you're amazing, you're awesome. Your brain believes like, I'm probably not going to get this right, but it's like 30 or 50% or something like that,
mm.
right? But if you tell yourself, it believes it 100%. So if somebody comes up and they're like, that's stupid, you'll only believe like 30, 50% of it. But if you tell yourself you're stupid, you 100%, you're like, well, that's fact. Same
Yeah.
with the good, same with the positive. If you're the one that's like, this was enough, what I did at work today, that was enough. What I did for my family today, that was enough. I went to work and I came home, that was enough. I provided for my family, that was enough. I went fishing, so I kept sanity, that was enough. I filled my cup first, that was enough. This was enough. And just, I, maybe I'm going down the rabbit hole, but this was such a huge shift when I started telling myself, and I became so obsessed with it. Like everything I did was, that's enough. Yep, that's enough. That's great. That's awesome. That's amazing. That's enough. That's perfect for me. And it was the biggest thing that shifted me out of such a deep, dark place because at first it was kind of wasn't quite believing it, but then I kind of went into like, okay, I might be okay. I might be
Yeah.
doing enough, right? I might be all right. And now I'm like, oh, and now like it's kind of a joke, but kind of not, where I'm like, I'm amazing. I'm great. I feel so good about myself. And it's and yeah, I'm not perfect, but at the same time, I know what happens when I spiral down into just that you're not enough feeling
Mm,
and berating yourself that it's not worth it. I'd
yeah.
much rather be like, I am amazing and I'm the coolest person in the world rather than like, well, I suck and I should have done this better and I should have done that better. Like it's just not worth it.
Yep.
And then I don't remember the other question, but that's probably my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. That's great because I think that is hugely important. The way we look at ourselves is everything, and and how we treat ourselves. If we can't treat ourselves good or unwilling to treat ourselves good, we'll never get out of that low spot. We'll never get past the hard things. And it works. It absolutely works.
Yeah.
Well, Jen, I so grateful that you came on and joined today and were able to come on the podcast. Great conversation. And it's always good to talk to you and spend some time with you. Um, we got to do that more for sure. But
Absolutely. This was
thank
so
you.
much fun.
Yo, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've had a lot of good conversations over the past year or nearly a year, and I always look forward to them. So thank you again, appreciate it. And guys, if you um, want to find Jen and learn more about what she does, basic to bold, for everything for social media, website, everything, right?
Yep. Yep.
Okay,
Super
and
easy
I'll
to find.
I'll put it in the notes for the show as well, and hope you guys have a great week, and we'll see you again next week on Freeing Your Mind podcast. Thanks for coming on. Love you all. God bless.